The night was silent, but I knew better than to believe it was peaceful. I had watched Karen's house sit dark and empty after her daughter and her new in-laws had finally packed up and left. The neighborhood was quiet, yes, but I felt a strange energy in the air, like the calm before a storm. That's when I noticed it, a faint glow flickering behind her curtains. Not the kind of light from a TV or a lamp, but something sharper, more deliberate. I stepped outside, hidden under the cover of darkness, and crept along the side of my house. I had learned from last time. No more predictable tricks. No more signs or water. This time I was thinking bigger. Something no one would see coming. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote control I'd secretly rigged earlier that week. It was a simple device, but with a powerful purpose. I pressed the button. Suddenly, the ground beneath Karen's house emitted a low hum. A series of small, barely noticeable devices I'd hidden in her yard began to activate. Not sprinklers, not alarms, but something unexpected. Tiny, high-frequency sound emitters. Frequency so high that only certain animals and insects could hear it. I'd discovered that her property was a haven for pests. Ants, beetles, even some stray raccoons that had been sneaking around her trash. And now, with a flick of a switch, I was about to turn her own yard into her worst nightmare. The first thing I saw was the flickering of her porch light, then a faint scratching sound. I grinned as I watched a swarm of tiny bugs, seemingly summoned out of nowhere, crawl and swarm over her meticulously maintained flower beds. They weren't destructive, but enough to send her into a panic. I knew she'd hate the idea of her pristine lawn crawling with pests, especially right before her big apology to the community. But that wasn't the real surprise. No, the real twist was what I'd hidden in the ground, an old, forgotten underground network of wires I'd reactivated. It was a secret I'd uncovered when I'd first bought the house, an old, disused alarm system from decades past, long since abandoned. I had reprogrammed it to send out faint but persistent signals, which I now used to interfere with her Wi-Fi, her phone signals, and her security cameras. I watched her try to unlock her front door, frustration mounting as her smartphone suddenly froze. Her voice, normally loud and commanding, turned frantic. What's happening? My system, my security. But I knew her devices were dead. I'd effectively cut her off from the outside world, from anyone who might have come to her rescue. Then, as if on cue, a strange noise erupted from her backyard, like a flock of birds startled into chaos. I'd rigged a series of ultrasonic devices to emit a sound that only her dog, her cat, and her pests could hear. The dog barked wildly, the cat hissed and ran, and the pests, well, they kept crawling. But now they were more agitated, more frantic. Her carefully curated yard was turning into a battlefield, and she had no idea who was orchestrating it. I stepped back, watching her stumble in the dark, her heels sinking slightly into the muddy patches I'd deliberately left in her flower beds. Her hands fumbled as she tried to turn on her flashlight, but the beam flickered and died. She was completely cut off, trapped in her own house by her own devices, my invisible trap. And just when I thought I'd had enough fun, I pressed another button on my remote. This time, a series of faint, almost unnoticeable vibrations began to ripple through her foundation. An old seismic device I'd secretly connected. It wasn't destructive, but it was enough to make her feel uneasy, unsettled. Maybe she'd think her house was trembling, or maybe she'd think someone was messing with her. Another subtle reminder that her control was slipping, that she was no longer the queen of her domain. All the while, I stayed hidden, my heart pounding with a strange mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. This wasn't just revenge anymore, it was a message. A warning that if she crossed boundaries, I'd make sure she paid in ways she never expected. And then, the moment I'd been waiting for. My phone buzzed. Not with a message from her. No, it was a notification from the neighborhood security feed I'd secretly hacked earlier. Someone had just arrived. Not a neighbor, not a friend, an outsider. Someone in a dark coat, sneaking around her property, tailing her movements with purpose. I smiled. The game was about to escalate. Because, in this new chapter, my Phase 2, Karen's own missteps would come back to haunt her, and I was ready to make sure she'd never forget who truly controlled the game. The figure in the dark coat paused, then slowly stepped closer to Karen's window, glancing around nervously. I watched through my hidden camera, heart pounding, with anticipation. This wasn't just some random intruder, it was someone with a purpose, someone who knew exactly what was happening on her property. I pressed the remote again and the ultrasonic devices flared to life, causing her dog to bark wildly and her cat to hiss furiously. She flailed in the shadows trying to see what was wrong, but her phone still refused to respond, dead as a stone. Suddenly, the figure froze, then reached into his coat. My stomach clenched. Was he pulling out something dangerous? But instead he revealed a small, sleek device, a kind of portable scanner, the kind that could pick up hidden signals, disruptions, even secret devices. My heart skipped a beat. Had he figured out someone was messing with her? Had he detected my interference? He moved quickly, scanning her yard, then his eyes darted straight to the window where I was watching. Somehow, even in the dark, he knew I was there, like he'd sensed my presence all along. A flicker of fear crossed his face, but then he did something unexpected. He took out a small flash drive and plugged it into his device. I saw the screen light up, and a few moments later, a message flashed. Target identified. Signal interference confirmed. Proceeding to next phase. Next phase? My palms grew sweaty. Had I been caught? Had he already hacked into my system? I had to act fast. I reached for my phone, ready to shut everything down, but before I could, a sudden sharp sound pierced the night. An alarm. Not from her house, but from mine. A signal I'd unknowingly triggered. That's when I realized I'd underestimated him. Someone was fighting back. Someone knew exactly what I'd done, and they had the tools to find me. I scrambled to disconnect my device, but it was too late. The intruder's voice echoed softly from the scanner. Target located, confirmed, initiate lockdown. And then, silence. Just like that. Quiet. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. I knew I had pushed too far. Someone was out there, someone powerful, and I had just stepped into a war I wasn't prepared for. I stared at the screen, heart racing. This wasn't just about the lawn anymore. This was bigger, a game of cat and mouse, and I'd just revealed my hand. The question now was, who was really in control? And how much longer could I keep playing this dangerous game before everything fell apart? The moment I saw her stumble, I knew I had won. Her heel sank into the muddy patch I'd deliberately left, her face twisted in rage, one shoe gone, her perfect image shattered. I didn't move. I just watched her struggle, knowing that my plan had reached its peak. The recording looping on my hidden speaker caught every word she shouted, every furious step she took. And then, quiet. Dead silence, except for the faint hum of the sprinkler system still active, like a beast waiting to strike again. She stormed up the driveway, furious, but it was too late. I pressed the final button on my remote. The underground seismic device, the ultrasonic disruptors, and the sprinkler barrage all synchronized in one last assault. Her house shuddered slightly, like the earth itself was rebelling. Her face drained of color as her entire world seemed to wobble around her. And just like that, it hit me. What I'd done was more than just minor revenge. I'd created a trap she couldn't escape. Her phone still dead, her security system disabled, her yard flooded with water and pests. She was completely isolated, a prisoner of her own misdeeds. The moment she turned around, trying to scream for help, I stepped out from the shadows. Not to confront her, but to finally reveal the truth she'd always ignored. I pulled out a small, taped-up package I'd hidden near the edge of my porch, something I'd prepared days earlier. I unwrapped it slowly, revealing a tiny speaker. I pressed the button. A voice echoed loud and clear, calm, cold, and deliberate. Karen, you don't get to decide when others cross boundaries. Remember this moment. This is your lesson. Her eyes widened as she realized what was happening. I'd set up a voice recorder, a trap for her arrogance, and now it was broadcasting live. Her own words, her own actions, for everyone to hear. The neighbors across the street, the family inside their house, they all knew. And then, I did. Something I knew she'd never expect. I pressed the final switch and her entire house went dark. All power, all signals cut off. No lights, no water, no way to contact anyone. She was left in her own chaos, alone with her humiliation. I watched her, trembling, her face streaked with mud and tears, as she realized her empire of entitlement was nothing but a sinking ship. Her carefully curated image had been dismantled by her own hubris, and I had been the one to do it. The last thing I saw was her sinking to her knees, clutching her muddy heel, crying out into the night. I turned away, knowing that I'd made my point. The boundaries had been set, and I'd made sure she'd never forget them. That night, I sat on my porch, sipping my coffee, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally taken back control. Karen's reign of chaos was over. The neighborhood was free. And I had proven that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't anger or violence, it's cleverness, patience, and knowing exactly when to strike. Because in the end, the greatest victory isn't just about revenge. It's about leaving a mark they'll never forget. And I did.